is an ABC News special. Live from Dallas, the 33rd Republican National Convention. Part of ABC News' continuing coverage of the '84 vote. Brought to you by Apple Computers, makers of Macintosh, and the new Apple IIc, and Handy Wrap 2. Reporting from the ABC News anchor booth at the Dallas Convention Center, David Brinkley and Peter Jennings.
Good evening and welcome to the second night of the Republican Convention here in Dallas. David and I have come to look over a group of very confident people from all across the country. Tonight, the convention is adopting without any public rancor the platform for the 1984 campaign. And I say without public rancor because the platform has led to some of the more heated debates here among party members. And we hope to hear some of them tonight, at least in this booth. David?
This is the platform. It's nice, neat, printed little book in red, white, and blue. And it tells what the Republican Party thinks, or what the writers of the platform thought about almost everything. The platform might be seen as a sort of press release or handout. It gives the views of those who wrote it, and not necessarily the views of everyone else. And the Republican platform represents the views of those on the platform committee, and to an extent, no one else. We are going to explore this tonight and see where this may lead the Republican Party in the future, '88 perhaps, and beyond. And to get us started into this, Richard Threlkeld is on the floor and has a report, some background. Richard?
Distinguished senator from Tennessee, and as you know, was a candidate for the presidency in 1980. We expect to see him back on that trail again soon. Howard Baker, Tennessee.
For Howard Baker and the other hopefuls, the trail to the White House begins here in Dallas, the best chance for the next 4 years to see and be seen. In Baker's case, he's retiring from the Senate on the sound assumption, considering how Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan got there, that the best way to run for president is to be otherwise unemployed. He's got lots of company. There's a forest of presidential timber in Dallas, most of them bashful as teenagers at a Methodist church social about saying they're really in the running, all the while shamelessly hawking themselves like so many new models at a computer software convention.
Not only are we going to win in 1984, we're going to win far beyond 1984 because it is this party that's going to emerge as the majority party in America throughout the century.
Congressman Jack Kemp of New York is right. This convention's got its mind on what happens after Ronald Reagan, or as referred to here, ATG, after the Gipper. Jack Kemp would like to be after the Gipper. And so would Vice President Bush. He's apparently convinced the delegates here he's not a secret liberal after all. He's the first choice of almost half of them, according to a Dallas newspaper poll. And so would Senator Bob Dole of Kansas in 1988.
And I don't know whether you can believe in omens or not, but when I went to the Anatole Hotel, I asked for my room number, and they gave me 1988. So I don't, but... I later discovered it was in Elizabeth's name, so, you know...
Indeed, the senator's wife, Elizabeth, Secretary of Transportation, might be the first woman on a GOP ticket. And there are others. Delaware's popular Governor Pete DuPont, New York's almost Governor Lou Lehrman, who lost a narrow race to Mario Cuomo in 1982, and others the pollsters and pundits haven't even discovered yet. Safe to say, though, that when Ronald Reagan rides off into the sunset someday, this August in Dallas will have been sunrise for somebody. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Richard. Two of the people you saw in that report on the class of '88, Senator Dole and Mrs. Dole, will be two of the three main speakers here tonight. The other will be former President Gerald Ford. Joining us now in the booth is Senator John Tower from Texas, and we're going to talk to him in just a moment about the party platform and about the future of the Republican Party. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Handy Wrap 2 has twice as much cling as old Handy Wrap.
Oh, you ain't got a thing if you ain't got that cling. Do-rap, do-rap, do-rap.
Oh, you ain't got a thing if you ain't got that cling. Do-rap, 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 do-rap.
Handy Wrap 2 with Cling Plus has twice as much cling as old Handy Wrap, so it seals tighter to seal in freshness and flavor longer.
Oh, you ain't got a thing if you ain't got that cling.
Handy Wrap 2. You ain't got a thing if you ain't got that cling.
Do-rap, do-rap.
Look what the computer wizards at Apple have come up with now. It has the power of these two computers, a built-in disk drive. It can run over 10,000 different programs. You get everything you need to hook it right up to your TV. You can even add a mouse. Introducing the Apple IIc. Now comes the real magic. You can take it home for under $1,300.
In the West, where Levi Strauss & Company began, how your clothes feel has always been just as important as how they look. That's why Levi's Action Slacks have an easy care fabric that gives, plus a waistband that moves with you. It's a feeling of comfort that's capturing more men every day. Levi's Action Slacks. A real comfort from Levi's Menswear.
Whether you know it or not, when you burn the candle at both ends, that's stress. And physical stress can rob you of certain vitamins. Stress Tabs gives you a complete formula of vitamins stress can rob and the body can't store, including biotin, 600 milligrams of C, plus vitamin E. If stress has you burning the candle at both ends, support your diet with Stress Tabs, because physical stress can rob you of vitamins.
We are here in our little two-story, one-bath cottage here in the middle of the convention floor in Dallas. And here with us is Senator John Tower, Republican, Texas, who is retiring at the end of this current term, which means next January, right? Now, we'd like to ask you, what we want to do, Senator, and ask your help, is to look at the platform, the present state of Republican thinking as we have seen it and heard it here, and try to figure what that means, of where is the party going in the future? Is it going to the far right, or what is going to happen? And what we hear, and I'd like your judgment on this, we hear it said here on the floor that the right-wingers grabbed the platform and ran away with it. What do you say about that?
I don't think that that's correct. I think a number of elements of the party had an opportunity to make input into the platform. It is a conservative platform and reflects the current mood of the party. But I think it also probably reflects the current mood of the country. The current mood of the country is, I think, at this moment, substantially right of center. As we all know, American politics are mercurial, and that could change. But right now, I would say that the mood of the country is definitely conservative.
But would you agree with some of the complaint that it is more conservative than President Reagan and includes some provisions he would have a hard time accepting?
Well, I think that you have to look at what the platform is fundamentally and not look at it so much in detail. There are details of it that perhaps I would prefer to see stated another way, but fundamentally it reflects my views, it reflects the President's views, and I think in that sense it's a fairly accurate platform.
Senator, you say that you think it reflects the views of the country, and yet if you look at some of the polls that have been taken of the delegates who are here, it doesn't even clearly seem to reflect theirs. Let's take the nuclear freeze, for example. Majority of the delegates here are in favor of the nuclear freeze, not in the platform. Can you explain what you mean by representing the country?
I don't think it's correct that a majority of the delegates here are in favor of a nuclear freeze. I know surveys are taken, but not all of the delegates respond to these surveys. I would doubt very, very seriously that a majority of these delegates favor a nuclear freeze.
So, sorry, David.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, can you come a little closer to why you think it represents the majority of the country? You are, after all, still a minority
I think fundamentally it reflects the thinking of the Republican Party. I think fundamentally as well it reflects the majority sentiment in the country right now. That's not to say everyone would agree with every detail in the platform. I'm not sure that I would. But the fact is, you look at the platform in broad context and not look at just the component parts that make up the whole.
Is it a document which you think the President is going to be very comfortable running with?
I think the President is going to be quite comfortable with it, because I don't think that anything would have gone into this platform that the President would have been very uncomfortable with. That's not to say the President might not have written some things slightly differently, but I don't think that the platform in any way flies in the teeth of the sentiments of this President.
Can I give you one example which is very much up your alley as the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee? The platform condemns what it calls Soviet violation of the Strategic Arms Limitation Agreement. The President's not on record with that, is he?
Well, the President's not on record on that point, simply because that which might be required to substantiate this assertion comes under heavy classification.
So you're saying the president agrees with it, it just hasn't been made public?
Well, the president has indicated that there's significant evidence of violations without coming out flat-footed and saying that there have been violations. And you have to remember that the president has to speak somewhat more temperately than delegates to a political convention do, because what the president says is regarded as national policy, is viewed as such by friends and adversaries alike. So obviously a president has to couch things perhaps in more careful language than do delegates to a national convention.
Now, Senator, you have been a major figure in Washington and in the Senate for a long time. Retiring now, you're going to be a professor, I understand, at SMU?
Yes, that's right.
The Republican Party has always been seen to be from the center somewhat to the right. The Democratic Party from the center somewhat to the left. People who read this platform now think the Republican Party might be moving further to the right. Is that true?
Well, again, I'll repair to what I said earlier, and that is, this is a reflection of Republican thinking of the moment. The Republican Party will always be a right-wing party in this country. I can't foresee any time that it would slip to left or center. It has gradually moved to the right over the past 20 years. I think that the country has moved somewhat to the right over the past 20 years. I would not call the Republican Party platform, however, any more of, let's say, an ultra-right-wing document than the Democratic platform is an ultra-left-wing document. I think the fact is that the Democratic Party has moved far more perceptibly away from the center and toward the left end of the spectrum than the Republican Party has from the center to the right.
George Will, who, as I told you, is one floor down. George, you hear me?
I do, David.
Has a question for you, Senator. George?
Senator, I'd like to ask you a question in your capacity as chairman of the Armed Services Committee about what I take to be a major step back toward the center, away from the right, in this platform as compared with that of 1980. In 1980, the platform was roundly criticized by many people for calling for military superiority. This platform calls only for a military second to none. And when people were asked about this on the platform committee, they said, well, gosh, it turns out to be awfully hard to define superiority. What sort of change in experience does this represent on the part of the Reagan administration after 4 years of dealing with the problem?
Well, George, I think the key word is it does reflect some experience in national security matters. The fact is, we don't want to achieve absolute superiority in every aspect of defense capability. For example, we would not want to have as large a land army as the Soviet Union. It would be foolish for us to have one that size. We wouldn't know what to do with it if we had it. And two, we have to recognize that our forces are asymmetrical, that there are differences, and therefore you cannot really define superiority in very precise terms if you think of it in terms of overall superiority. As a matter of fact, I testified before the platform committee, and I suggested that the committee avoid calling for all-out superiority because the definitions are much too difficult. In fact, what we do call for is qualitative superiority, which is what we've wanted all along. Not numerical superiority. We can't get that numbers game with the Soviets. But we must have a qualitative edge. We must have a technological edge.
Senator Tower, thank you very much for joining us. Senator Tower, who is sometimes mentioned. Quick question, final question. Would you be interested in Secretary of Defense in a second administration?
I didn't know that the office was vacant.
Would you be interested if it were offered?
Well, the fact is we have a very fine Secretary of Defense who's doing an excellent job, and nobody's mentioned the prospect to him that that position might be open.
Thank you very much. Senator John Tower, thank you for joining us. We're going to go down the floor in the moment. Elizabeth Dole and Senator Robert Dole are going to be along as our guests. We'll be down to the floor and back right after these messages.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
First, someone gets an idea. Then someone else may look at it differently. Even add a thought or two. Technology from a company called TRW helps ideas get around. Because getting an idea from one place to another is as important as getting an idea. Tomorrow is taking shape at a company called TRW.
You'd love to buy a new house, but you can't find a buyer for the house you're in. So you're trapped, locked in, caught in a house you can't sell. That's why you need the seller's security plan from ERA Real Estate. If we don't sell your house, we'll buy it. There is a difference in real estate companies. ERA Real Estate, a part of the Commercial Credit Financial Network.
When arthritis pain says you can't, remarkable micrograins of arthritis medicine let you say,
I can.
Introducing Encaprin, a better way to treat arthritis pain than plain or buffered aspirin. Because its hundreds of aspirin micrograins are made to deliver unsurpassed relief to minor arthritis pain in a way that's safer for your stomach than plain or buffered aspirin. So when arthritis says you can't, new Encaprin lets you say,
I can.
Encaprin micrograins go to work in a remarkable way. They're made to pass through your stomach without dissolving, so they're safer than even buffered aspirin. And when they leave your stomach, they provide hours of relief to minor arthritis pain in your shoulder, your hand, wherever it hurts. When arthritis says you can't, new Encaprin lets you say,
I can.
When arthritis pain says you can't, remember, Encaprin lets you say,
I can.
I can.
I can.
The 2,235 delegates down on the floor now are dealing largely with procedural matters, and it's going to be that way for some time this evening before we get to these two major speeches by the Doles and the one by Gerald Ford. I just want to perhaps clarify something in response to a couple of telegrams we had overnight from what sort of people the delegates are on the floor. Actually, the largest percentage of people down there are politicians. 22.4% of the delegates are in politics as a full-time activity. About 17% are executives. About 13% are professional specialists.
How many are lawyers?
Well, lawyers, about 11.1%, David, and professional specialists, I'm not sure exactly what they mean. But they have a pretty good representation of everything. Farmers, doctors, household services, technicians, labor, machine operators. But as you get down to the, if you will, the lower economic scale of things, you get fewer representatives of the trade, industry, and professions than you do. Said politicians very much at the top.
I ask that because I have seen a convention with 1,000 lawyers on the convention floor, which made me wonder if they would ever get anything done. The answer was it didn't. Some of these delegates you're talking about, we're going to talk to on the floor. Lynn Scher, tell me again.
David, we're down in the Connecticut delegation with Senator Lowell Weicker. He has, of course, been one of the most vocal opponents of the very conservative bent of the platform. And Senator Weicker might be making at least a little bit of news tonight. Senator, you are waiting for a guest, is that right, in your delegation?
Yep. We hope that Ben Hooks, head of the NAACP, gets the opportunity to come here and be with the Connecticut delegation. He's not been invited, to the dais, but nobody speaks more eloquently or more forcefully for minority America than he and the NAACP. And I might add, ironically, he addressed the Republican convention in 1980 and, of course, was an appointee of a Republican administration. So that, we spend so much time worrying about Ferraro's returns and where the comma goes in the tax plank, and yet there's so much unfinished business when it comes to civil rights. I think we're better paying attention to what Hooks has to say than what we've heard to date.
Senator, if this is a convention that doesn't invite a Ben Hooks to come and speak, what does that say about the direction of this party, particularly in the next 4 years?
It shows we've got a lot of homework to do. And clearly that's just in the makeup of the convention itself, the makeup of the Republican Party. Isn't it ironic that Hooks speaks for a minority, whereas we are the political minority in the country? And there's only one way I know to get ahead, and that's to reach out. This convention is not reaching out. Indeed, it closes the doors just to keep everybody comfortable in the room that they presently exist.
What about 1988? Let me get back to that. Right now, what do you see as what's going to happen on the floor of the convention in 1988? Are you still going to be shut out? Are you still going to be inviting the Ben Hooks to be your guests because they're not speakers?
Well, I think clearly what's going to happen is that the marketplace of politics is going to force the Republicans to come back in toward the center, as it did to the Democrats when they went way off to the left. So in 1988, that's a little far out there. All I know is that the question to be decided is not will Ronald Reagan be reelected? He will be reelected. How many senators, congressmen, governors, et cetera, are we going to elect in this election? And if we don't elect enough of them, people are going to scratch their heads and figure out maybe we better do something about it.
I know you said you don't want to talk about it, but Geraldine Ferraro, what did you think of her performance today? Does that change anything?
No, I'm going to tell you right now, ever since I came here, you know, and I've tried to talk about constitutional issues and civil rights issues and individual liberties. Everybody wants to talk about that or where the comma goes in the tax plans. I don't give a damn where the comma goes, and I don't give a damn about Geraldine Ferraro. I care about the great issues that really face both political parties.
Senator, thanks very much. Very much the argument, of course, that Ms. Ferraro has made, too. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Lynn. Senator Weicker was very impassioned on the platform committee here. He's one of the people who said even more passionately than then that what the Republican Party has to do is to continue to attract those Democrats and independents that went away from Jimmy Carter in 1980 and joined up with Ronald Reagan. And, of course, Senator Weicker in Connecticut has managed to attract those people, and he continues to be elected, much to the disgust, as somebody said, of the Democrats in Connecticut. Another person who is very much classified as a moderate in this party at the moment and who is seen in the broad context as being in something of retreat is Senator Charles Mathias of Maryland, and he is down on the floor with Richard Trelkill.
Peter, more than a moderate, during the struggle for delegates and who would be on this Maryland delegation, Senator Mathias was described by one of the Maryland conservatives as, quote, a liberal swine. Senator, is that the level of discourse and argument that's going on between moderates and conservatives here?
I don't think that's typical by any manner of means. That's the unusual case. As you know, the easiest thing to do in politics is to call names. And the hard thing that I think most people do is to wrestle with the issues and try to find solutions to problems.
Liberals or moderates, whichever you may be, is there room for you or any of the other people like Weicker in 1988 in this party at all anymore, considering the platform?
I think the party's in trouble, and I think the country's in trouble if the Republican Party becomes monolithic and ideological. There has to be some flexibility and options in order to govern a great country like this. And the moderates as well as conservatives help to feed in an array of ideas that are important.
All right, how much of this is sour grapes? Senator Mathias, Senator Weicker, and other moderates simply having lost control in the old Rockefeller liberal days. They don't have the party anymore. The conservatives now have it, and it's sour grapes, isn't it?
It's not sour grapes in any sense. President Reagan has proved, for example, that you have to be pragmatic. You have to adopt some progressive ideas in governing the country.
All right, last question. You're up for re-election in 2 years. Why doesn't Senator Mathias simply switch parties, become a Democrat, get out of this party in one in which you may be more comfortable?
Well, I made up my mind a long time ago that as long as I can do something useful as a Republican, I would stay a Republican.
All right, gentlemen, here's one moderate who's going to stay and tough it out. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dick. So we've made it clear, I think in the first few minutes, or at least I hope we've made it clear, that the Republican platform is causing heartburn among some of the Republican moderates. Unfair of us to continue without letting you in on what the platform is specifically and what it is that is upsetting the moderates. So let's go to Sander Van Ocker with a good look at the platform.
The members of the Republican Platform Committee took the party, not only where they thought Ronald Reagan wanted it to go, but a good deal beyond. And they gave him the most conservative party platform in modern memory. The White House tried, through former Transportation Secretary Drew Lewis, to modify the document, especially on the tax issue. But, for the most part, the committee's conservatives, led by Congressman Jack Kemp, Newt Gingrich, and Vin Weber, and supported by Chairman Trent Lott, succeeded in drawing the sharpest possible distinction between this party's platform and the Democratic platform. Party moderates, such as Lowell Weicker, had virtually no influence on the proceedings. Making 53 separate references to Carter-Mondale policies, the party went on record, despite White House objections, as opposed to any attempts to raise taxes, in contrast to the Democratic platform, which pledged to shift a greater share of the tax burden to wealthier taxpayers. Again, in opposition to White House wishes, the platform attacks the Federal Reserve Board's destabilizing action, calls for timely information about the board's decisions. The Democratic platform refrained from direct criticism of the Fed, but called on it to be pragmatic in appraising the real economy. On defense, the GOP platform does not call this year, as it did in 1980, for military superiority over the Soviet Union, and it expresses the hope that military spending can level off in the near future. The Democratic platform said, "We will reduce the rate of increase in defense spending." On social issues, abortion, the Republican platform opposes it, calls for a human life amendment to the Constitution. The Democratic platform supported a woman's freedom of choice. ERA. The Republican platform makes no mention of it. A proposal to include it in the platform did not even get a seconding motion in the Human Resources Subcommittee. The Democratic platform supported ERA. School prayer. The Republican platform states, we firmly support the rights of students to engage in voluntary prayer in schools. The Democratic platform made no mention of school prayer. And the GOP platform took a shot at Geraldine Ferraro by calling for officials and candidates to provide full disclosure of their own and their spouse's finances.
The platform, in a sense, goes beyond Ronald Reagan to the time when he's left the political scene and a new party emerges. And there's no doubt that those who drew up this document want that party that emerges to be a good deal more conservative than the party that Ronald Reagan was the nominee of in 1980. Gentlemen?
Are they likely to succeed, Sandy?
I can't hear you, David.
Are they likely to succeed in this?
I don't know. I think that we right now are in a curious positioning period for both parties, a restructuring of both parties. I think that if Ronald Reagan gets reelected and they take a bath in the Senate and the House, that's going to start doing something of what Lowell Weicker talked about, a maybe moderating influence on the party. I think, however, that with Jack Kemp, who I think is laying claim to being the ideological heir to Ronald Reagan, that the push is going to go that way. And once pushes go in parties, they're rather like trying to turn ocean liners around in mid-passage. It's very difficult. So this one has to go its course.
Sandy, thank you very much. On the platform on which Sandy is standing at the moment, the Republican Party is presently preparing to adopt the platform without any public opposition. We are waiting for Senator Dole and Secretary Dole to come and join us. They are making a tour of the television networks this evening on a schedule which was arranged by the Republicans, so while they have been running well on time on the floor, they are running a little behind here. We will be back in just a moment after this word from your local stations.
I took Rolaids for 10 years. Now I get better relief from Tempo.
With Tempo, no more tongues.
It took remarkable Tempo to make these heartburn and gas sufferers switch.
Tempo's soft, not hard and chalky. So it dissolves fast, fights acid and gas.
And the soft Tempo form holds more medicine than the leading tablet. 75% more acid-relieving medicine.
Better relief than Rolaids or Tums.
Switch to better relief. Switch to soft Tempo.
Oh, the noise and confusion in the telephone world. But there's one name that comes through loud and clear. Cobra. Cobra cordless and corded phones. A full line designed and engineered to be right for you, then double inspected to make sure. Which is why no one makes a better cordless than the Cobra phone. No wonder Cobra has sold more cordless phones than Ma Bell. Cobra, or something less. It's your call.
Are you sure about what we're doing?
Why? You cooling off?
No, just wondering why we're doing it.
For the fun of it.
I guess we could do worse than write for the most popular and exciting magazine in the world, huh?
Hey, pass the soy sauce and write, will you?
David Burney and Morgan Brittany. They're with you on the pages of Glitter this fall.
We're with you on ABC with you.
Elizabeth Dole, Secretary of Transportation in President Reagan's cabinet. Thank you very much for coming in. Pleasure to have you with us, Ms. Dole.
Tonight. Thank you.
I've seen some buttons around here, lapel buttons saying Dole and Dole, but they don't specify which would be president and which would be vice president. Can you enlighten us on that?
No, I really can't. I'm not sure where those buttons came from. I'm still trying to trace the source at the moment.
You're not surprised to see them, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, at this point, let me just make it clear, I'm not running for anything.
All right. We are trying to explore the question, Mrs. Dole, Mrs. Secretary, what the platform we have all been reading and talking about here, what it means for the future of the Republican Party. We know this year they are confident Mr. Reagan will be elected, no doubt, perhaps are right. But next time, is it going to be a more right-wing party than it is now? What is your judgment?
You know, David, I think platforms have a lot of interest at conventions, and that's where the peak comes during the convention. That's when the most attention is focused on the platform. It's guidance, general guidance. Obviously, as we move along into the next few years, my own view is that I think we're going to need to broaden the base of our party. I think this president has, through the force of his personality and through his very strong, forceful leadership, he has brought a number of different groups together. For example, traditional Republicans as well as conservative Southerners, blue-collar, urban ethnic groups, and also young people. In fact, Dick Worthland has some polls showing that among 18 to 24-year-olds, the president has a plurality. And it's a matter of keeping that coalition together and moving forward, I think.
But there's a part of a very large coalition that's left out. Not only does the platform not mention the ERA, which we might have expected because the president doesn't care for it, it doesn't even mention rights or benefits or women in any way at all. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, the rights of women and the interests of women, let me put it that way, are involved in many of these issues, no question about it. If you're talking about the economy, for example, economic recovery, when you look at the median income of women today, which is about $13,000, you see what the president has done through being able to reduce the rate of inflation from 12.4 when he took over to less than 4% today. That means about $1,023 in that woman's pocket. The tax rate cuts give her another $300. Then a number of these matters that he's been concerned about, which he has already completed, such as pension reform, IRAs for the homemaker, as well as the woman who works. These make a difference too. So I think, women are interested and concerned about many of these issues. Now, let me speak for just a moment
Can
about
I just ask you
ERA?
about the spotlight of economy, because that's what you bring up. For 40 years, the Republicans have fought for a balanced budget. Now you've decided it's not the way to go. How do you feel about that as an individual? Are you going to have enough money in the next year to pursue all of the things in transportation you'd like to pursue?
Well, I think that obviously and we're going to have to get the deficits down, no question about it, and we're going to have to give everywhere.
Without taxes.
But let me just speak to the transportation part of this platform. I'm very pleased with that part of it. I think there's an agenda there that gives me a number of issues to move out on right away. Issues that I care deeply about, that we can, the deregulation part, safety across all of our modes of transportation. There's quite a good agenda there for the future of this country.
Without raising taxes.
Repair of roads and bridges.
Without raising taxes.
Again, on taxes, and of course the president has spoken to this. Don Regan and others are the ones who are the experts in this area. I'm in the transportation field. But clearly, I believe that the president's view is, whereas Mondale's is taxes first, the president's is only as a last resort. And I don't think there's anything else I can add to that discussion.
Well, tell me this. Do you...
ERA, let's address before
All
we
right,
complete
okay.
our...
Now, this is a political document. It may be a holy statement, but it's a political document. Why wouldn't it have been politic, at least to say something in here about women's particular and specific problems? You say they make less money than men, and they do. What does the Republican platform say
Well,
about
now,
that?
David, I have not had a chance to review all the details. In fact, I just arrived here yesterday. My husband, who I understand is going to be visiting with you in a few moments, was on the platform committee, so perhaps he can address some of these because he's going to sponsor many of these programs for women. So I would want to be able to really take a look at it closely first. But if there is indeed not a word in there about helping women, then I think there should be. I would agree that there should be. But obviously, everyone is going to have something that they don't agree with or think should be altered. I don't think a platform is ever going to please everybody 100%. And again, it is guidance.
I'm a little puzzled about this whole business of the platform, the holy document, whatever you call it. Almost everybody we've talked to is essentially disavowing it, not disavowing it totally in terms of content, but saying, here it is, here's this book, but we really don't have to worry about it. You've said it's for Republican conventions.
Well, I
and
think
it's
that's
going to
where
go
it has the
why
most
do
focus.
Why do you spend so much
Very
time on
honestly.
articulating what you think a party should stand for, and then come along and say, well, we'll ignore it when this is over?
Well, I think, again, it's an opportunity to have people come together and try to lay out as best they can what is reflective across the board of the views of the party. But I think it's a very tough thing to do in the first place. I do think that as we move through these next years, we should be trying to broaden the base of our party, to be reaching out and bringing in groups who may not be as strongly represented as they should be now.
Why should you not
so
be
I
a
see it
candidate in
more
88?
as an inclusive, excuse me?
Why should you not be a candidate in 88?
Well, first thing, I don't have a blueprint to run. I'm really not running.
Well, if you change your mind, let us know.
I'll do that.
And on the point you make about the platform being a document put out for the convention only, Gerald Ford was in his chair last night, and we asked him, while he was president, did he ever once get out the platform and look at it?
What'd
and
he
he said
say?
no. What else?
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dole's husband, Senator Dole, will be along in just a minute. We'll be back right after this word from your local stations.
For everyone who's tired of summer reruns, Apple announces some exciting new programs. Every business day, a new software program is being developed for Macintosh. And if you can point, you already know how to use it. Macintosh, the computer for the rest of us.
Sandwich. Ham. Lettuce. Here we go. Yeah! We're out of Miracle Whip.
A sandwich just isn't a sandwich without the tangy zip of Miracle Whip salad dressing, the bread spread from Kraft.
See, it was just a bad dream. There's plenty of...
Now try our reduced calorie salad dressing, a third fewer calories. New Miracle Whip Light.
Nothing much changes in Wakita, Oklahoma, even when Conoco, DuPont's energy subsidiary, comes to explore for oil. Because we invented a remarkable way to search for oil. By gently shaking the ground and recording the sound waves that echo back, a method that lets us go about our business without interfering in anyone else's. So DuPont or not, nothing changes in Wakita. Well, almost nothing. DuPont, better things for better living.
Spray any air freshener, and what do you get? A wet, misty spray. That's why Renews It invented Fresh and Dry. It's really dry. No wet mist or powder in the air or anywhere. Spray Fresh and Dry anywhere. It's so dry, it freshens the air, your carpet, your upholstery, without wetness. Why spray wet? Spray Fresh and Dry from Renews It.
It's dry.
The only air freshener you can spray anywhere.
This fall, enter the multi-million-dollar world of high fashion,
Lovely, quite lovely.
where girls become women in a flash,
She is impossible to deal with. Handle it, Wesley.
confronting their rivals,
What's she doing here?
handling the pressures,
Welcome to life in the fast lane.
and loving the glamour.
I want her for the full line.
This fall, ABC introduces Terry Farrell and Nicolette Sheridan. They're with you in Paper Dolls.
Senator Dole is going to be joining us in just a moment. We want to go first to the platform where Sandy Van Oker is talking to Senator Baker. Sandy?
Senator Baker's been down here. He's a pretty good amateur photographer taking class pictures of us. Now, I'd like you to take a picture of the next 4 years when a man named Howard Baker leaves the Senate and runs for the president. What can Howard Baker, who's regarded as a moderate, do with the kind of platform this party's produced?
Well, you know, this party is what it has always been, and I trust will always be, and that is a political organism, a vehicle that lets every candidate, every aspirant for public office gather together and try to gain the right to serve. And I don't have any trouble with this platform. There are parts of it that I might not have done exactly that way, but I doubt if there's a person in this hall who would have written every word exactly like it is. So I don't plan to have any trouble with that.
But, Senator, this platform is fairly rigid, as platforms are. You have built a great career in the Senate based upon compromise, which is necessary in an institution. How, as a politician, do you go ahead when you can see the direction of this party?
There are two things that are going to happen this fall about the heart and soul and philosophy of this party. One of them is this convention and its platform. The other is the way the president and the vice president, our nominees for national office, may go forward and identify those issues and positions in the fall campaign. And when we're through, my hunch is that Ronald Reagan and George Bush will frame those issues so that the party will be fully united and we'll have no trouble with that.
Now, you are going to run. Start preparing, aren't you?
Just in case the FEC's watching, I'm not announcing tonight, but I make no bones about it. I would like to run in 1988.
Do you think the platform missed an opportunity to reach out for those heart supporters in the Democratic Party that could not vote for Walter Mondale? And how do you hope to get them, independents too?
Let me honestly tell you, I don't think the platform's going to make much difference one way or the other in that respect. Our outreach is going to have to come in the way we shape those issues in the campaign this fall and the way the party conducts itself for the next couple of years. And we can do that. And we're going to go after those people, and I think we'll get a lot of them.
Okay, thanks. I'd like 6 of those pictures if they're good. Thank you very much. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Sandy. Senator Robert Dole of Kansas, Republican, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, which means he can tell us what they're going to do about that if he is so inclined, or I doubt it. We're happy to have you with us. I'm glad
Thank you very
could come
much.
in. Now, we're trying to see what this platform means in terms of the Republican Party beyond 1984. Does it mean it's going to become a more conservative, right-wing party hereafter? What do you think?
I don't think so. Obviously, there's a small group of so-called conservatives came down here and sort of took over the platform operation. They don't represent the majority view among House Republicans. They don't represent the majority view of Republicans in the Congress. Unfortunately, they're a minority in the House where they don't really have to get anything passed. They can just vote no and send out a newsletter. So that's in effect what you have. You have a newsletter here that they'll use in the next couple of years to run around the country and say, this is what I would do if I were president.
Walter Mondale's also going to use it too, isn't he, in this campaign, and going to say this is what the Republican Party represents, and how are you going to answer that?
Well, the same way we did in '76. I ran with Jerry Ford, and I read the platform. First time I'd ever read one because I was a candidate, but nobody ever asked me about it. After I left the convention, I put it away on a shelf, and I think it's still there.
Sorry, David. We've been stressing, and you have been stressing, or the people in your party who talk about this sort of thing, the kind of voters you've got to get to win, those in the middle, the Democrats and the independents. If Walter Mondale says about the platform, for example, that there is no provision for women, as David has just been talking to your wife about, what would your answer be to the Democrats in that respect?
Well, I think, without getting into all that Elizabeth just stated, I think, frankly, the media is sort of hung up on ERA. I mean, I voted for ERA. But I think that's maybe past now. We're moving on to something else. We're really looking into pension equity, child support, and a lot of things of that kind. And they're in the platform. The platform is not bad. I don't want to leave the impression that it's just something that we threw together down here in a week. But obviously it contains the pet ideas of people who are in control. And, they put some things in the tax side that I don't think are realistic. You add all that stuff up, it's about $75 billion in tax expenditures, and we're supposed to be the tight-fisted party who wants to balance the budget.
Is it correct to say that the right-wingers grabbed your platform and ran away with it?
They grabbed it and ran about the 50-yard line. I think they were stopped there by the White House. They would have gone all the way.
All the way?
Yeah, they had a good quarterback. Jack Kemp was in there, had his helmet on. But aside from that, they didn't get all the way. They got about halfway down the field, and the White House said, hold it, fellas. Ronald Reagan's a candidate in '84. And it ought to reflect his views. And I think they backed off a bit. It's a good document. We can live with it.
If Jack Kemp gets nominated, he can write his platform, right?
Well, he probably already has it written.
George Will, who's one floor down here. George has a question.
Well, Senator, you've just said some rather acerbic things about what I think you call the so-called conservatives who came down from Washington and made hay with the platform. Could you tell us, just for those of us who are, and that's 99% of the country, economic laymen, what is the difference between the Dole approach and the Kemp approach to the economy?
I think there's very little, but it just happens that we, fortunately, are in the majority in the Senate. We have to push the president's programs through. Those in the House who don't agree or feel it's not good politics to vote for any tax changes, they can vote no. They're not in the majority. I don't think there's a nickel's worth of difference between my views on taxation and Kemp's or anyone else, but and I think the American people understand that. We don't want to raise taxes. We let Walter Mondale have that prize.
Senators, I understand that Jack Kemp wants taxes cut more. He thinks that we've been sort of half-hearted and tepid in cutting taxes. Well, you don't believe that, do you?
Taxes, they encourage about $75 billion more in tax cuts in this document. I think many are great ideas, but we have a deficit of about $200 billion.
That's more than a nickel's difference.
Well, that's a big difference, and they don't seem to worry much about that, but they have a different philosophy. They believe you're going to wake up some morning, the deficit's going to be gone. I don't share that view. We've got to get interest rates down. I want to support the president. I think the platform, we can live with it. It's not going to cause any heartburn.
Senator, I'd like to change the subject just a little. The convention here this week has been slightly overshadowed, and somewhat overshadowed on some days by the troubles of Ms. Ferraro and her husband. Having seen and heard what you've heard from her in the last couple of days, do you think she's now put that problem behind her?
I'm not certain, but I must say I watched about an hour of it today, and she did a good job in explaining in detail many of the areas, but it's a very, very technical subject. I think she has some question. Anybody who has to dig up $70,000 to pay some back taxes, that's going to be a question. But her personal presentation was excellent today.
How would you feel, given having watched the degree of scrutiny there's been this week, if you are a presidential candidate in '88 and say Mrs. Dole is a vice presidential candidate, how would you feel about having your affairs gone over like that?
Well, they've pretty well done that now. When you're both in the federal government, it's really worse, and one in the federal and one in the private. Elizabeth works for the president, I'm in the Senate, and so ours is pretty much out there. It's a bit even, I think, more difficult in that circumstance than, say, Miss Ferraro and her husband, because he's in the private sector. But it's a terrible thing.
Senator Dole, I think we all understand, and your wife has just finished saying, that the platform is something when you go home you may take it with you, and then you put your coffee cup on it to keep from staining the tablecloth. That's about all it's good for. Trent Lott, the chairman, admitted that several of the provisions in the platform were differed from President Reagan's views. And he said, well, he doesn't have to follow it. Isn't that kind of silly?
Well, in a sense it is, but, you know, people come to the convention, many delegates, and I think members of Congress have sort of an advantage over everyone else. We know how it works, and we put our ideas in, and they say, oh, if Senator Dole wants this, I better add and vote against it, or if Jack Kemp or anyone. But it does mean a lot to the Republican Party. I don't want to play down the platform, but it doesn't bind anyone. And that's how the president can float around it or walk around it, and he may even mention it Thursday night, but I doubt it.
What are the assets you would bring to a presidential race in '88? You're right up there in what's being called the class of '88. What are the assets you have?
Well, I don't know. I think experience and making some difficult decisions on taxes, on voting rights, on a lot of things where we have agriculture, farmers. But it's so far away, I'd rather focus on '84.
Don't you and Senator Baker and others like you, who you're sometimes described as a pragmatic conservative, wouldn't you have some difficulty getting nominated by some of the delegates on this floor today?
Oh, I don't think so. I think they're mostly conservative out there. I think most, my views are pretty much in line with their thinking. But it just, you know, someone may catch fire and others may not. I don't have any, I haven't even thought about that, but I guess it's a good time to at least shop around a bit, but I haven't done much of that.
When you start, let us know. Thanks very much for coming in, Senator. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. We look forward to hearing your speech and your wife's. Has this ever happened before?
I don't think so, and maybe after mine it'll never happen again.
Perhaps. Anyway, speeches by Senator Dole, who's here with us, and his wife, who was here a few minutes ago, and by former President Gerald Ford coming up, and of course we will bring that to you. ABC News coverage of the Republican National Convention continues after this message and a word from our local stations.
MasterCard, find me a bargain.
MasterCard International, so worldly, so welcome, so worldly, so welcome.
Maybe something in blue. MasterCard, you're so chic.
Make every document the same size.
Charts in color.
Figures in blue.
Headings in black.
And collated.
Right.
This job is for a multiple-choice copier, the Canon NP155. Its zoom system makes a full range of enlargements and reductions, up to 15 copies a minute in black, brown, or blue, and can collate.
Don, do I know how to pick a value?
Yes.
Yes.
Canon's NP155 gives you more for less. For information, call toll-free.
Sunday.
Hold on, I'm coming out.
If Hardcastle is dead, why is McCormick fooling around?
I'm cutting you out of my will.
Then, Al Pacino defends his honor, while John Forsythe obstructs the law.
Out of order.
and justice for all. Parental discretion is advised.
There it is, the convention floor at the Dallas Convention Center with 2,235 delegates, and behind them the alternates in this hall, which we must say at the outset is a good deal more suitable to a convention than the Moscone Center in San Francisco. And there is the podium to which the day Republicans have devoted an enormous amount of effort, so much so if you could just stop there for 1 second and have a shot of that podium. Among other things, put a curtain up there behind each speaker which changes to match the color combinations of whoever is wearing a particular color of clothes. That's Senator Paula Hawkins there from Florida on, and behind her, the curtain, which has been color coordinated. The Republicans very proud of the money they put into this podium. And on the floor at the moment, the delegates are listening to a series of procedures as they prepare to adopt their platform.
I'm not sure that color business works so great. When Jean Kirkpatrick was on the stand last night, she had on a green dress, and behind her was what looked like a purple. That's not a terribly salubrious combination of colors, is it?
Certainly used a lot of purple.
I wouldn't think so.
Let us go to the floor itself and ABC's Lynn Sher. Lynn?
Peter, I'm down here in the South Carolina delegation with Senator Strom Thurmond. Senator, there has been a lot of talk about the platform, a lot of people unhappy with it. What do you say to them?
Well, I don't guess any platform could be written that please everybody. You see, you've got the variations in philosophy in both parties. Now, as a whole, the Republican Party is more conservative. The Democratic Party is more liberal. Some fall to the left. But after all, a platform is merely a statement of principles that not necessarily have to be adhered to, but the direction in which they feel the country ought to go.
Does that mean the platform really doesn't mean anything?
Yes, it means something, but it doesn't mean you're absolutely hard-bound by it. For instance, President Reagan, and of course they're writing the platform mostly for the party, but President Reagan may have to compromise on some legislation. It'd be wonderful if he could get everything in the platform, but that would be almost impossible. But it gives him a guide and gives the country a guide as to what the party stands for and the direction in which they think the country ought to go.
What do you say to Senator Lowell Weicker and others who are very angry about this platform and feel as if they've just been shut out and that it will hurt the party eventually?
Well, they have a right, of course, to their own feelings, but the great majority in the Republican Party don't feel that way.
You know, Senator Weicker
is somewhat in a minority, you see, in the Republican Senate. He's a very fine man, good friend of mine, but in other words, each person has a right to his own thinking, and he's not bound by anything. As a senator, he can advocate what he pleases, vote as he pleases, and so he's not hampered in any way, I don't think. I don't think anybody would be.
He has invited Ben Hooks of the NAACP to come and sit in his delegation this evening. He says Ben Hooks should be up there making a speech tonight. What do you think?
Well, I'm not only committed to do the inviting, and so you'd have to talk to them about that.
Think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, I have no objection to anybody speaking that they want to invite. I'm a great believer in freedom of speech.
Senator Thurmond, one of the people on the floor who actually likes the platform. Gentlemen?
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. Richard Threlkeld is now talking to Representative Phil Gramm of Texas, who until recently was a Democrat, then changed parties and is now trying to change from the House of Representatives to the Senate, running this year. Richard?
David, Phil Gramm is in a hot race with a liberal Democrat, Mr. Doggett, Congressman Doggett. He thinks he's slightly ahead, and he's a conservative, as you mentioned. Congressman, last night, Catherine Ortega stood up there at that platform and said to Democrats and independents, mi casa is tu casa. My Republican House is your Republican House. But if I read this platform right, it's saying there's no room for anybody but true believers in this Republican Party.
I don't read it that way, Dick. Let me tell you this. I'm running for the United States Senate in Texas, and I would be willing to tear the cover sheet off our platform and the cover sheet off the Democratic platform and put those two documents on every kitchen table of every family in Texas and ask them to decide which document represents the blueprint for America that they want for their children and the people they love. I'd be willing to bank my election that they would choose our platform. Our platform presents a program of hope and opportunity and jobs for our people. It's a reaffirmation of our basic values, and it's a platform that I'm comfortable with. Not that I have to agree with every element in it, but I think it represents America's agenda.
Well, what about those moderates, what few there are left, those politicians who have to run in Iowa or New York or New Jersey, and they need Democratic votes, they need independent votes, and they're telling us tonight we can't get elected on this platform.
We're not going to get Democratic votes by imitating Democrats. Let them debate how they want to spread the misery equitably. We've got to talk about how we want to create jobs, opportunity, and a future, how we want to unleash the creative genius of our people and make the economy and the government work again for all the people in the country.
Is that the Republican moderates' problem? They're too me too?
Well, the people aren't going to buy a phony when they can have the real thing. We've got to offer the American people a concrete program for America's future. The Democrats can't do that because they're so concerned about buying the votes of the people riding in the wagon, they've forgotten the people pulling the wagon.
Congressman Phil Gramm, thank you. Gentlemen.
Richard, thanks very much. We've been talking, Peter, about candidates for 88, Jack Kemp, Vice President Bush, and who knows, Howard Baker, who knows who else. They have been circulating around town acting like candidates. No one, of course, has said anything because this is Mr. Reagan's year. But they've been all over town, parties and receptions and so on, standing beside those wheels of shrimp with red sauce, smiling, shaking hands, as if they were running for assistant order commissioner.
Well, I was going to say, David, too, I mean, we were noticing earlier that perhaps we can get our cameras to go and look for it. There were all the signs of an organized demonstration down there on the floor for Jack Kemp, similar to the organized demonstration there was last night for Jean Kirkpatrick, the ambassador to the United Nations, when she came and spoke. And so perhaps as we continue, the cameras down there can search for some of the evidence which we think we have seen from here. There we are. There's a Kemp in 88 sign. In fact, there were an awful lot of Kemp for 88 signs.
The whole floor full
I think
of
we propitiously picked the right moment.
They've been bringing them in here on little wagons for the last 3 or 4 hours.
Well, Jack Kemp,
88.
the man who is sometimes referred to as the producer behind the Republican Party platform this year. And there he is on the platform now.
Thank you very much.
A demonstration as he makes a brief appearance on the platform to acknowledge his supporters in the crowd. Jack Kemp. He's going to be joining us, by the way, a little later on. We had, at least he said he is, we had asked him if he would come and join us. It is clearly his convention for just a moment, so let us listen to Jack Kemp.
There's a purple curtain again.
49 years old.
Fellow Republicans, fellow Americans, what a difference a president makes. Remember 1980, American hostages in Iran, the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, destabilizing the third world, pushing communist colonialism into our hemisphere, our great engine of free enterprise shutting down, and a terrible inflation, with some saying it was endemic to democracy. Democratic Party leaders telling us that decline was inevitable, that these forces were beyond our control, and that America had reached its limits, and Jimmy Carter seeming to grow old before our eyes. What a difference leadership makes. Our economy is expanding again without inflation. The United States is respected again. Our adversaries are on the defensive. And America is once again a model for other nations. And Ronald Reagan actually seems to be getting younger. Isn't it good to have a president who doesn't apologize for America? Isn't it wonderful to have as our ambassador to the United Nations a woman like Jean Kirkpatrick who doesn't apologize